Thank you for joining us for our Legal Empowerment Fund webinar. First of all, welcome to the new year, and really appreciate you all joining us. As I mentioned earlier, we will be recording this. It's already being recorded. So my name is Jasjeet Singh. I'm the Director of Programs here at California Change Lawyers, and we're just excited to be bringing this fund back. I have my colleague, Brooke Canella here, who has been helping and will be one of your key contact folks as we go through this process as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the slides. So a bit about the fund, for those of you who might not know, the idea of this fund really was launched a couple of years ago. So, in 2021, we were thinking about how to really gather more of the funding and kind of harness this power and harness this power for good, right? We wanted to create a fund that was a response to the importance of issues around law and social justice issues, and really trying to figure out how to empower our young folks and those who are maybe even new to the law, or recent practitioners, or those even thinking about going to this space, to really understand the racial reckoning that we were dealing with and continue to deal with. And as we can all see, especially over the last couple of years, with some of the attacks on civil rights and human rights, that this work is more important than ever. So the fund really adopts a broad-based approach. We do seek to embark on supporting movement lawyering. We want to build the capacity of smaller organizations and newer legal organizations, which we recognize is a very difficult space, especially for those who are up and coming and trying to figure out how they can support and navigate the communities that they work with. And then, of course, we want to support new and diverse leaders in the legal profession, and that's going to be done through our Leadership Pathways funding, which is broken into two categories, which is our General Leadership Pathways Fund, and then our Leadership Pathways Fund for the legal fellowship itself. So for 2024, for this cycle, we are anticipating a total grant amount of just over $500,000, so $520,000 in total. And we will be looking at all the priority areas, so movement lawyering, capacity building, leadership pathways, all of the priority areas will be open. This is different from last year. For those of you who had applied, I don't believe we provided any legal fellowship funds last year, but this year all categories will be open. And the About Us is down here. You can read it for those unfamiliar with us, but we are a statewide foundation. We are a small but mighty group, and we are doing everything we can to empower this next generation of leaders in the legal profession and build a more fair and just system. We do believe that a state that is as diverse as California should have a justice system led by advocates of all backgrounds. So I'll get started. So I think the most important question is just eligibility. 501c3, that is the eligibility requirement. If you are fiscally sponsored, that is okay as well. The application will allow you to list your name and then list your fiscal sponsor. Your fiscal sponsor, of course, needs to be a 501c3. So that is the immediate simple eligibility requirement for applying to the Legal Empowerment Fund. Our impact is very wide and broad, and you'll see as we go through here that to some level, the organization does not want to thwart the many areas that you all are working on. So, right, we are not here to tell you which areas are important or not important. We realize that many of you work in different spaces of the legal space. So, we've seen applications that come through all types of spaces. We have eviction prevention, deportation defense, wage theft, environmental justice. And these are examples of things that we have already funded in the past. So that's always an easy way to mention that. I have two folks raising their hands. Do you have a question real quick?
Just letting you know we can't see the presentation change slides. We're still in the first slide.
Oh no, sorry. Let me Let me stop the share real quick. One second. Always fun to have issues. All right, let's try again. Do y'all see that or no?
No.
We just see click to exit full screen.
Yeah. Which is what it's telling me to do. So give me a second. Let me go back to Canva here. I do love technology and dislike it all at the same time. Let's try this. Sorry, everybody.
We've all been there, so don't worry about it.
Yes. All right, let's try this. How's that?
You can see that.
All right, I'm not gonna do the full share because then it'll probably just mess up again. So if you see random things in the background, just ignore it. All right, so let me click next. Do you all see this slide? It talks about the eligibility at the top. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So going back to the impact piece, really just, as I said, we want to make sure that we are not choosing for you all what areas of the law are important or otherwise deemed necessary. We want to learn from you all and make sure that you are telling us what is important for your communities and that we are working to figure out how to support those particular spaces. So the fund is still supporting a wide range of issues. We support community education. We are happy to support litigation work, even direct services, and all the way up to policy advocacy, so that we can get a very wide range of services for the community through this fund. So in terms of areas, geographically, we are supporting folks from across the state. Organizations who are located outside of California must be able to show that they are doing work within the state, and that is where work is taking place. Here and there, we've had national organizations, but they're doing a very specific project just here in California, and that's been something that we've considered. But part of that is like, you can't, we want to make sure folks have a strong, they show strong ties to the state of California. We are a state organization. We are not a national organization. So if you are out of the state, we would need you to showcase like your strength in terms of what have you been doing in California over time that makes you a good candidate, because a lot of this requires community conversation, community discussion. And you need to have those relationships built before we can kind of step in and start funding spaces like that. In terms of, again, talking about the various areas of support, I think movement lowering has been a common question, and we want to make sure that we're not defining movement lowering for anyone, but it really is that intersection of law and organizing. So I do want to make sure that if you're thinking about applying for movement lowering, we want to make sure that you have the community connections where you have the organization piece, plus you have the legal work and the legal background that can help you actually get those services and supports to the communities with which you work. Capacity building, those of you who are thinking about applying for that, is very straightforward. We want to make sure that you can build on the success that your organizations have been getting over the last couple of years. And then, of course, leadership is really about, creating tomorrow's change makers and tomorrow's leaders. So diving a little bit deeper into that, when we think about that intersection of law and community organizing, again, we want folks who can showcase for movement lowering strong ties to community organizing groups. So other groups that you have worked with, having a base of community members or grassroots campaigns, something that you can showcase to us that this is the work that you've been doing. And then we're hoping that if we're able to fund you in this space, you will be able to push for more equitable laws, pass stronger policies, and create better outcomes for your communities and your clients. And you all will be able to apply for a maximum amount of $40,000 as a grant. This is a one-year grant that we will be offering under Movement Learning. For capacity building, the way this works is we are looking to support organizations who have less than $1 million budget. So this is really about building the capacity of smaller organizations, folks who are less than $1 million budget and are now ready to take that next step of growing your organization's legal work in California. One thing that I'll add in here is that we do, in addition to that $1 million budget limit, we also want to make sure you have at least one attorney on staff, so that your attorney is able to provide the supervision and support for anybody who's able to get funding out of this. We want to make sure that you have a legal team in place, but we're really just looking for at least one attorney on staff who can support the organization. And same thing here, it's a $40,000 grant for 1 year. And then leadership pathways. So I know it sounds a little confusing, but we have two subsets of leadership pathways. We have the general leadership pathway and then the legal fellowship pathway. So here we're really trying to figure out how we can support organizations where you will be able to take either existing staff or bring in folks, maybe law school students, fellows, however else you're using that funding, for example, for the general leadership space, and grow the work of the organization. So classic examples here, as I had mentioned earlier, are organizations that are working on wage theft, organizations that are working on criminal justice reform, deportation defense, really organizations that are working at the epicenter of this work, and you could use this funding to really amplify and uplift change makers in this space, where they can come in, learn about the work that you're doing, and you're using this funding to really grow your organization in a way that impacts and empowers the leaders of tomorrow. And then the legal fellowship grant is the only exception to the $40,000 one-year grant maximum. And the legal fellowship grant is something that I'm sure all of you have heard about from us. It's a very it's similar to any other public interest fellowship grant, except that the funding is going to you, and then we would work with you to put out a job posting so that you can find a fellow for your organization. And that is a one-year $80,000 grant, the majority of which is being used to fund your fellow for the time that they're with the organization. This is an increase of funding that we have had from about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. This funding used to be less, recognizing that organizations are usually in the nonprofit space are unable to really fund at a high level and unable to attract a certain level of applicants for their fellowship programs in comparison to the private system. We really want to make sure that a strong grant amount would bring in stronger applicants. Within this $80,000, you would pay your fellow, also pay for fringe benefits, and then leftover funds, if you have any, can be used to offset supervision costs, for example. So this is kind of a just an overall breakdown of what I just discussed. I have some estimates in there, just what we're looking at right now. These are not, for sure, this is all we will spend in those specific priority areas, but this is the estimate right now. So again, in movement lowering, we're estimating about $120,000 is available. Again, you can ask for up to 40 if your organization, for example, we have had organizations ask for 10,000, 15,000, whatever your needs are, and that fluctuation will decide how many organizations actually get funding. So the goal is simple: strengthen the model of social change that's premised on the integration of law and community organizing. That is movement lowering, at least how we've tried to define it, but we leave it up to you to tell us what you think that is. But our desired outcomes are more fair and equitable laws or policies, either created or implemented, more community members served, and more favorable case outcomes achieved due to that increased access to diverse lawyers, and then a strengthened ecosystem for the next generation of movement lawyers. And I'll say this for each one, but my example here is, this is what, when you're applying, really try to focus on the goals and outcomes that we're looking for. So hopefully you're able to apply and write your application in a way that tries to address the outcomes that we seek to create. And then you can talk to us about the work that your organization is doing to help us as an organization reach these desired outcomes. For capacity building, again, increase the likelihood for smaller, diverse legal organizations to thrive. So under $1 million budget, a significant amount of work, or majority of the work in California. And our outcomes are really to achieve greater stability and longevity, and/or innovation in diverse legal organizations, and then the incubation of new organizations led by diverse lawyers and other folks on staff. So we are really trying to figure out how to maximize your potential if you're in an organization who's just outside that cusp and is looking to grow and make a larger footprint in your work. And then lastly, we just talked about it, the leadership pathways. It's really building on-ramps into law and tracks into positions of power. So for the general leadership track, we're really looking for you to increase the number of attorneys of colors in positions of power, including judgeships, district attorney. That is our long-term outlook. If you're in a position where you get that funding and you can think about how you're going to take this funding and support the longer, stronger goals of the future of really putting people into positions of power, we would love to hear about that. For the legal fellowship track, it's really about diverse law school students and lawyers obtaining that career in public interest. We have had multiple fellows who have completed their fellowship and then stayed at those organizations to go on and become staff attorneys because they've either been there a year or 2 years, and now they have gained a lot of knowledge and expertise in those spaces where they're able to really take their career to that next level and interact and build with the organizations at a deeper level as they transition out of a fellowship and into a staff attorney position. So this is a little bit of the nitty-gritty. Some other things that we will be considering when we're making funding decisions is we will consider like how overall your organization is contributing to the movement for social change. We want to see how your organization is focusing on systemic and policy change as a measurable impact. We do want to hear about your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just your thoughts as an organization. There'll be a specific question that just is trying to understand how you're continuing to move that needle. And then we would always like to see like your leadership, your board and staff. Are you representative of the communities that you're serving? And that's usually helpful to understand the lived experiences and the spaces from which your organizations come from to really help us understand how you're connecting and deepening your impact with the folks that you interact with as an organization. So timeline-wise, we'll be opening the application this afternoon. I wanted to make sure if there's any questions that come up from today, I might be able to make some adjustments. But we'll open the application up this afternoon. And then the application will close a month from now. So February 16th, we will close the application. It will be due at 5 p.m. PST. And I say that because technical assistance would really be Brooke and I. So we won't be able to do much after those applications are due. And we do use Submittable, which many of you may be familiar with. So the system allows you to put in a deadline. And once that deadline passes, then the application automatically closes. We are hoping to begin that review process by February 21st. Give us a couple of days to kind of organize all the information. And then we hope to have grant announcements made towards the end of March. Right now, we have a tentative goal of March 22nd, and give or take a couple of days, we should be able to have those announcements made at that time. So again, it's $520,000. It's available across all three categories, with Leadership Pathways having 2 subgroups. This is a 1-year grant. There is a possibility of renewal. In the past, we have committed to some renewals after we reviewed, reports or updates. But this year there are no renewals. We are opening all the applications for all subgroups up. So capacity building, leadership pathways, and movement lowering. And again, we have a $40,000 maximum for those subgroups. And then there's an $80,000 grant that would come towards the leadership fellowship piece. And I misspelled leadership. So, and there is the link. The application will be opening this evening. You can click on that link. It takes you to our general submittable page. Right now, there should just be and we'll email this out so you all can see this. So if I click on here, it'll take you to our Change Lawyers submittable page, and you'll be able to apply. This should be live on our Change Lawyers website this evening. So simply just go to our website, changelawyers.org, and there should be a how to apply section, and then you'll see the fellowship piece in there. If you don't see it, shoot us an email. Happy to send you the link directly. And if you have questions, Brooke is on here, but you can reach us at lef@changelawyers.org. So that just stands for Legal Empowerment Fund. And it helps us gather all the questions and concerns into one space. So if there's something that we don't address on the next couple of pages, which is our FAQ page, please just shoot us an email, and then we'll be happy to get back to you within 2 or 3 business days at most. And make sure that we can address any of your questions and concerns. So I'll go through these FAQs, and then we'll actually open up to questions if folks have any. So, will the Historical Diversity Pipeline Grants Program and the Legal Fellowship Grant Program still exist? And I still answer this because we did have a longstanding diversity pipeline grant system that no longer exists. We did this a few years ago once we launched that the Diversity Pipeline Grant Program and the Legal Fellowship Grants are now formatted in a way where we have a separate legal fellowship program through the Leadership Pathway piece, and organizations that previously used to apply for diversity pipeline grants can see if they fall into some of the other categories listed here, which generally could be movement lowering, capacity building, or leadership pathways. If you are a current or active organization with a current organization with an active grant with Change Lawyers, you are eligible to apply. I mentioned this earlier. If you're based out of California, as long as you have a project where a significant amount of the work is being done here and the grants are being used to support that work solely in this state, then you can apply. We do not accept 501c4 organizations to apply for this grant. You must be a 501c3. And there is no necessarily any priority given to current or past grantees. Organizations who are new to Change Lawyers are highly encouraged to apply. We will be looking at all applications, whether you're current, past, or have never applied before equally, but we always encourage our current and past grantees to continue to apply and apply to the system. So public and government agencies are not eligible to apply. Again, only 501c3s. And then I think a common question that we used to get is, what if you're a part of a collaborative or a coalition? You are welcome to apply, but we just ask that one organization take the lead on behalf of the collaborative or coalition. So maybe just talk about the collaborative or the coalition of which we are part of in the application. Just make sure that that organization that is taking the lead on behalf of the collaborative is an independent 501c, does have an independent 501c3 status. If you do apply on behalf of a collaborative, you're not eligible to apply as a second applicant for your individual organization. So please be mindful of that if you're applying as a group, that will be your priority application. And if you apply as an individual, we will not be looking at that application. Typical grant amount, again, $80,000. For the other categories, the maximum will be 40. You are able to request less, but generally you'll have an option in there to type in the application page on how much you'd like to be considered for. If your organization has different projects, can the organization apply requesting funding for each project? And the answer is no. We ask that you choose the project for which you want to be considered for and apply. And I say this because maybe your organization has somewhere where they can apply for capacity building. Maybe you're a smaller organization and you do movement lawyering and you want a fellow. You're going to have to make a choice on which bucket of funding you'd like to be applying for from your organization. At this time, we aren't doing multi-year funding. The closest we really gotten to that is providing renewals every once in a while on discretion. But at this point, it is still a 1-year grant application. And then, a question that we've had asked before is, will the grants primarily be general operating or specific project work? We made this change a few years ago. All the funding will be earmarked as general operating support. We just ask that you still use it to support the approved work listed in the grant application, and that'll be clear if you're selected and you sign a contract with us, that clarity will be there. But we did this to earmark everything as general operating support to give you all the maximum amount of flexibility on how that money reaches your account and how you're able to support the organizational work that you do, while knowing that you applied for a specific bucket of funding to support the work. This is pretty straightforward, so I'll just skip over it. But yes, the whole point of the capacity building grants is to support organizations who are expanding their services. So capacity building is very broad. So oftentimes organizations don't get funding to get for strategic planning or development projects or board development. That is what capacity building can do for you through this funding. So if you want to work on those things that oftentimes many philanthropic organizations don't fund, that is specifically why we have the capacity building bucket, to make sure that if this type of work could grow your organization, grow your board, make stronger comms or fundraising pitches, then we would love to hear about it, and that would be the appropriate subgroup to apply the funding for. Ooh, that's it. All right. I will open it up to questions, and then I'll leave the screen share open for now if you need me to go back to a specific slide. But please feel free to just raise your hand, and maybe Brooke, you can just unmute people if you see a hand raised. Plus, my presentation was so good that literally there's no questions, which that would be great. All right, Cindy, I see you.
Thank you for this very informative webinar. I'm wondering, for those of us who have been lucky enough to get grants in the past, if we reapply, but we're not really changing our programming too much, I guess that's my question. We're not really changing the programming. We're expanding in terms of numbers, but the programming is going to be the same or similar. would that be okay?
Yeah, I think we would just ask that you talk about, what you have done thus far, and then your application would expand into how this would look for 2024 and beyond. So, for example, if you receive money through movement lawyering, you would be able to talk about what the organization has done thus far, and then how you plan on building and expanding on that work for this upcoming year. So, simple answer, just talk about all the good stuff that's going on, and tell us how the funding will continue to make changes in the community.
Thank you.
I see Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi. So I had some questions about the fellowship, legal fellowship application process. So if I understood the estimated amount allocated to that was 120, and you said the amount is 80. So does that mean you're funding like 1.5 of those, or how does that work exactly? And then I have a couple of additional questions.
Yeah. So the leadership pathways bucket, the current estimate is 120 for the general fund, but 160 for the fellowship fund. So at this point, we were probably thinking about funding 2 fellows full time. And generally in the past, that's about what we've done. Through the Legal Empowerment Fund, we usually fund maybe 2 or 3 fellows per year for the year long. So that's kind of what it's been. And then for the general leadership pathways, that allows for maybe 4 or 5 organizations funded, just depending on where the majority of organizations end up applying to, and if we want to move those buckets around, move the funding around a little bit.
Okay, I think there was a typo in the slide. It had those 2 reversed. And is the timeline, the application that's opening, you said today through mid-February, that's just to set up the position, like, is that correct? So like the actual recruitment of the fellow who would fill that position would be after that timeline, is that correct?
Yeah, so this is a little bit different. I mean, maybe you all are familiar with some of the other fellowships that are out there where organizations must apply for the funding with the fellow. So that is not the case here. You are applying as an organization, and if you are selected, yes, we would work with you almost immediately to start the job posting process, help come up with like what you're seeking in a fellow, what your requirements are. So all that would be if and after you're approved for the funding. Go ahead, Lydia.
So in the general leadership pathways, is there are there guidelines or stipulations for the partnering organizations where we would place someone?
Guidelines. As long as it's placed in California, do you want to be more specific?
Just like if there are particular organizations, so if like entertainment versus maybe like litigation, or like in just different, are there specific roles that they would have to play, or specific organizations that we would reach out to?
Yeah, no, for the general leadership fund, and I guess a good way to separate it from capacity building and movement learning could just be like, I think the general leadership fund is going to be your most how most philanthropic organizations fill a grant, right? This is organizations that are looking to create impact in the legal space, where there's unison with our mission statement and the work that we're doing, and is probably going to be the space where the most broad applicants are going to apply, where you may be working on water rights and we'll have applicants who are working on worker rights or something else. So it's really about the organization receiving that funding. And if that means you can use that funding to hire a summer fellow, that's great. You can use that funding to simply deepen the project impact of the work that you're doing. So I think that's a great place to talk about the specific project you'll be doing to expand opportunities for up and coming legal minds who can take that work and kind of build on it. And that's slightly different from the fellowship, because a fellowship would be more engrossed. There would be a supervisor. You would need to find someone and hire someone, and they would probably have to work on a specific project that they can expand on for an entire year.
So to clarify, it could be for like any programs that is propelling someone forward in
Yes.
that direction.
Yes. Any other questions? So we will be sending these slides. We have everyone's email that we had reached out to, and those of you who RSVP, thank you. We will share out these slides. We'll also share a link to the webinar once we can get that up. And then, of course, I'll go and see if there's any minor typos and make sure I spell scholarships right, and make sure that you all see that. I see one more hand though. I see Mira, go ahead. I see your hand up. You're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to check this will be the only cycle to apply for this year.
Yes, this is the only cycle to apply this year. The Legal Empowerment Fund is probably the closest we have to a general grant making process. We do have other funds, but those are not open in this process. For those of you who are familiar with our work, we have an immigrant legal fellowship program that's funded in partnership with the Department of Social Services, for example. That is its own bucket. And then here and there, we can make off-cycle grants, but those are rare. This is probably the best opportunity, and this will be the only open cycle for grants this year. And the last thing I'll add is if folks have questions around which bucket to apply for, please just send us an email. I realize that it can be difficult to figure out where you really are fitting in. And to some level, we leave the goals and outcomes a little broad so that we can allow you all to tell us what you're looking for. But I know that sometimes that can be a little confusing because you're like, is this the right bucket? I can't tell you which bucket to apply to, but if you want to chat with us or have a conversation with me to kind of talk a little bit about what you're thinking about applying to, I'm happy to kind of support and guide. I will say that historically, we have received less applicants for capacity building, and the legal fellowship itself usually receives a large chunk of our applicants. But if you look at the funding and how many grants we'll be able to give out, the legal fellowship grants are going to be generally the most competitive, especially because they're larger, and we in our limited ability only have 2 grants to provide in that space. In comparison to all the other buckets, we'll be able to probably give 3 or 4 or even 5 grants for capacity building, 4 or 5 for the general leadership pathway program, and 4 or 5 for movement learning. So just keep that in mind when you apply. And then our website should have a list of past grantees. So you should be able to see who has received funding and maybe learn more about the work that those organizations have done if you want to make any comparative decision making with your team. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you all for joining. Hopefully this has been helpful, and we will share out the slides, and then again, the application will open up here this afternoon. And then please, if you have questions, especially questions around actually applying, please just don't wait till the 16th to send me an email. I'm happy to help you out earlier. Brooke and I will be here to support you as you go through this process and applying with us. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.